In the comments to another video, someone asked for an update on the fir trees, and that is the abies genus, of which I have several species. This one here is the Spanish fir, Abies pinsapo, and since it does grow in a Mediterranean region, I think it was more negatively affected by the cold than most other firs. You can see last year it had pretty small growth, and then the buds that were on there from last year have not broken bud yet, and actually they don't look that good. So I may have lost a lot of buds on the Abies pinsapo Spanish fir. This particular cultivar is the fastigiata columnar form, and it is grafted onto Abies firma rootstock. So although there doesn't appear to be a lot of loss of last year's needles, actually these little ones at the top are last year's needles. These are the year before last, down lower, and even older before that. I think that since it has so many good needles, it should be able to mount a recovery. We'll have to wait and see. But at one point in the time, I planted the blue variety, Abies pinsapo glauca, and lost that one as well. So my verdict on Abies pinsapo is it's probably too cold in Middle Tennessee to grow it this far north, and I'd probably avoid it. Let's move on to the next. This is the blue cloak variety cultivar of Abies concolor, otherwise known as white fir, from western US and mountainous regions usually. This one has a bluer than normal foliage, and it's putting on new growth, which comes out kind of lime green almost, very light green. It hasn't broken bud at the very top here on the apex yet. I'm worried about those buds. They look a little dead, but the one right below it here looks like it's going to break bud sometime soon, so we'll wait and see. In theory, this species should be more than cold hardy enough to survive the little bit of cold we had here. It wasn't a little bit, it was -4, which is pretty uncharacteristically cold for Middle Tennessee. But this species should be able to survive that, in theory. We'll have to wait and see, but this Abies concolor is also grafted onto Abies firma Japanese fir rootstock. And the reason so many firs get grafted onto firma is because it's resistant to Phytophthora root rot, which is a common fungus present in the soils around here. So if you can find one grafted onto firma, I recommend it for Middle Tennessee. Moving on. Okay, this is the Bayshan Fur, Abies bayshanzuensis, from central southern China, and it has not broken bud yet. Got this from Conifer Kingdom. Yeah, this is on Abies Muelleriana Turkish fir rootstock. And here is the Taiwan fir, Abies kawakamii, putting on really good growth. It looks like the apical buds may have not sprouted, but the ones just below that are sprouting and heading vertical, so I'm guessing they'll establish a new vertical leader. Overall, I'd say it's doing good. I need to trim the grass around a few of these. Haven't done that because of other planting, but nevertheless, it's doing well. Taiwan fir, also from Conifer Kingdom. Okay, here's the Nordmann fir, Abies nordmanniana, from the southern Black Sea coast, Caucasus region of central, I guess, southern Russia, nation of Georgia, eastern Turkey, maybe north central Turkey. And this is the tortifolia cultivar of Abies nordmanniana. It hasn't, yeah, I guess it is sprouting right here at the apex. This is a pretty reliable fir. This one is grafted onto Abies firma as well, also from Conifer Kingdom. And it's got a pretty good form. I have another one that is not doing quite as well as this one, so maybe the verdict is still out. But most people say in Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, it's safe to plant the Nordmann fir. And so far, this one has been a pretty reliable grower, especially if you can find it grafted onto Abies firma. I recommend it. This little one here is the Farges Fur, abies fargesii, from central China, grafted onto the abies Mulleriana Turkish fur rootstock. It hasn't broken bud yet, but I think it will because these buds look fairly engorged. So I have high hopes for it. Let's see what it does. It's still fairly small. This is the Korean fur, abies koreana, and this cultivar is the Horseman Silberlock. So it has these needles that curve up and show the white glaucous underside of the regular Korean fur needle. Normally on the regular straight species Korean fur, the needles would be straight, relatively straight, but in this one they're curved. And this is also grafted onto abies firma from Conifer Kingdom, putting on a lot of new growth. All this is new growth here, you can see. And there's the leader right there. It doesn't really want to be a leader. I've got it propped up against that stake there. I think this was a grafted branch. Not surprising, but hopefully over time it will establish a nice vertical tendency. At least it branches well so that I can continue to push it vertical. Okay, here's the Nico Fur, abies homolepis, and this is a large specimen that I found at a local nursery. Actually last year had a problem with yellowing needles. You can see some at the bottom are still yellow, but the top is fairly green, which I think I really only care about the top. But it also had some yellowing up there too. Started to put on new growth everywhere, even down at the bottom. So we'll see how it does this year. Last year was pretty warm and dry at times, so I'm just gonna leave it there and see what it does. It's on its own roots, the abies homolepis from Japan, Nico Fur. A relatively high elevation, I believe, in Japan, so maybe not as happy in the heat and humidity of Middle Tennessee. And here's the star of the abies collection, the abies firma itself, the one that everything else is grafted onto, obviously, on its own roots. Also found this at a local nursery. The main leader, it's hard to tell, but the main leader did not sprout this year, so that is unfortunate, and I'm going to be relying on one of those other side branches to maybe take over and be the new leader or do something. I don't know, we'll see. I'm assuming that the main leader was damaged by the extreme cold. This fur does grow at lower elevations in Japan, hence its heat tolerance here in Middle Tennessee. So really good growth always. It's getting larger every year. A reliable grower, other than, actually this is the first time the main leader hasn't sprouted, which is probably okay because it was kind of stretching out pretty far up there. We'll see what it does. If you can find it, abies firma, I recommend it. I've got a couple smaller ones I'll show you. This is the big one. Pretty cool. Here's that smaller abies firma I was telling you about. I don't know why this one is so yellow. I think I mentioned this in another video, maybe, not sure. But it's sprouting. That's good. This came from forestfarm.com, so I think you can still buy them there. Abies firma on its own roots, obviously. And this is a abies concolor again, a white fur, except this one is also on its own roots. This is the Santa Fe cultivar that I purchased from shop.arborday.org, I think is the name of that website, but pretty small, and it's put on plenty of growth here. Let's see, that's maybe 2 inches of new growth. And as you can see in the background, I've got it, this one's surrounded by the white rock. That's going to be my new ground cover around all my trees. And I chose white as a reminder because it reflects the heat of the sun. And I want to keep those roots as cool as possible on these conifers. So should be fine on this one though. I mean, the concolor can survive in extremely adverse conditions. I remember seeing it growing on cliff sides in the Grand Canyon where the roots are just dug down into cracks in the rock. So it's a pretty rugged species. But the challenge here is not drought, the challenge is resisting fungus. So we'll see what we can do here. White fur, looking good. And now for some bonus content. This is not a fur, but it's called a fur. It's the Douglas fir. Latin name Pseudotsuga menziesii, native to the Pacific Northwest mainly. putting on new growth. Check out the vertical leader there. Looking really good. I'm hopeful that the combination of morning shade, relative protection from overhead sprinklers, and kind of windy in this little wind tunnel here between the houses, and also having this rock substrate around that's not going to really harbor as much fungus in theory, since the rock will continually be scorched by ultraviolet radiation. We'll see if those combination of factors can allow the Douglas fir to survive and thrive here in Middle Tennessee. It's worth noting that the largest Douglas fir in Middle Tennessee, which is something like 75 feet tall, is located about an hour north of here in Clarksville. So under ideal conditions, they can become huge. So fingers crossed on the Douglas fir.